My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for 28 years, I believed that being the reliable daughter meant sacrificing my own dreams for everyone else's happiness. Growing up in a middle-class family in suburban Ohio, I learned early that my role was to be the responsible one, the one who never caused trouble, the one who always put family first. My older brother Jake was the charming one who could do no wrong, and my younger sister Emma was the baby who needed protection and support. I was simply Sarah, dependable Sarah, who would always be there when needed. The pattern started when I was 14 and my father's construction business began struggling. Robert Mitchell had built a modest company doing residential renovations, but a housing market downturn and two major clients defaulting on payments left him scrambling to keep the business afloat. While my mother Linda worked as a part-time receptionist at a dental office, their combined income barely covered the mortgage and basic expenses, let alone 3 children's needs. Jake, then 16 and the star quarterback of his high school team, required expensive equipment, training camps, and travel to showcase games that my parents insisted were essential for his future scholarship opportunities. Emma, only 12 but already showing remarkable artistic talent, needed art supplies, private lessons, and entry fees for competitions that could lead to scholarships or recognition. My parents made it clear that both Jake and Emma had special gifts that deserved investment and support. I wasn't without talents. I excelled academically, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while participating in debate team and writing for the school newspaper. My English teachers regularly praised my writing ability and encouraged me to pursue journalism. But academic achievement felt less urgent to my parents than Jake's athletic potential or Emma's artistic gifts. Good grades were expected from me, not celebrated, and my writing was seen as a nice hobby rather than a viable career path. When the family's financial stress reached a breaking point during my sophomore year, I made what seemed like a natural decision. I got a job at the local grocery store, working 15 hours a week after school and on weekends. Initially, I told myself the money was for my own expenses, college savings, and teenage wants. But within a month, my paychecks were going directly into the family's general fund to help with mortgage payments and utilities. My parents didn't ask me to contribute my earnings exactly. Instead, my mother would mention casually how worried she was about the electric bill, or my father would comment on how behind they were on the mortgage. When I offered to help, they expressed gratitude and relief that made me feel important and needed. For the first time in my life, I was the solution to family problems rather than just another expense. The dynamic intensified during my junior year when my father injured his back in a construction accident. Workers' compensation covered some medical expenses, but the reduced income and mounting medical bills created a crisis that seemed to threaten everything we had worked for. Jake's senior season was crucial for scholarship opportunities, and Emma had been accepted into a prestigious summer art program that required a significant fee. I increased my work hours to 25 per week, taking on additional responsibilities at the grocery store and accepting every available shift. My grades remained strong, but I dropped out of debate team and reduced my involvement with the school newspaper. When friends invited me to movies or social events, I usually had to decline because of work or family obligations. My social circle gradually narrowed to a few close friends who understood my situation. The summer before my senior year, I worked 40 hours a week while my siblings pursued their respective passions. Jake attended football camps and training sessions that my parents drove him to, sometimes requiring overnight trips that cost money we didn't have. Emma spent 6 weeks at the art program, creating a portfolio that would eventually help her gain admission to art school. I spent the summer stocking shelves, running cash registers, and watching my college fund grow smaller as family emergencies arose. When college application season arrived, the financial realities became clear. Jake had attracted interest from several universities offering partial scholarships that would still require significant family contributions. Emma, still 2 years away from college, already needed substantial investment in portfolio development and college preparatory programs. My parents approached the topic of my college plans with obvious anxiety. Community college made sense, they explained. I was smart enough to succeed anywhere, so starting at the local 2-year school would save money while I figured out exactly what I wanted to study. I could transfer to a 4-year university later, after Jake's education was complete and the family's financial situation had stabilized. The plan felt logical and responsible, Even as I watched my friends receive acceptance letters from universities I had only dreamed of attending, I enrolled in community college while continuing to work 20 hours a week at the grocery store. The compromise allowed me to take challenging courses and maintain my academic excellence while contributing to family expenses. My parents expressed pride in my practical approach and maturity, contrasting it favorably with my peers who were accumulating massive student debt for uncertain career prospects. Community college turned out to be more engaging than I had expected. The journalism program was small but excellent, taught by professors who had worked at major newspapers and magazines. I wrote for the campus newspaper and completed internships at local media outlets that gave me real-world experience and professional connections. My writing improved dramatically under the guidance of instructors who recognized my potential and pushed me to develop my skills. But even as I thrived academically, the family's financial demands continued to grow. Jake's partial scholarship covered tuition, but not room, board, and expenses, creating a shortfall that required monthly contributions from home. Emma's art supplies and lessons became more expensive as her skills advanced, and she prepared for increasingly competitive opportunities. My parents' own expenses increased as they aged and dealt with health issues that required medical attention and prescription medications. By my second year of community college, I was working 30 hours a week while taking a full course load. The grocery store had promoted me to assistant manager, recognizing my reliability and work ethic. The increased income was immediately absorbed by family needs, leaving me with little money for personal expenses or social activities. I told myself this was temporary, that once Jake graduated and found employment, the pressure would ease. When I transferred to Ohio State University as a junior, the financial juggling became even more complex. Student loans covered tuition, but I still needed to work to pay for living expenses while contributing to family obligations. I found a job at the campus newspaper that paid little but provided valuable experience and professional development opportunities. The work was engaging and meaningful, exactly the kind of journalism experience I needed to build a career. But the demands of a full-time course load, part-time work, and family financial contributions left me exhausted and stressed. I watched my classmates participate in internships, study abroad programs, and social activities that could advance their careers or personal development. When opportunities arose that conflicted with my work schedule or family obligations, I inevitably chose responsibility over possibility. The pattern continued after graduation when I landed my first full-time position at the regional newspaper. The job paid modestly but offered excellent experience covering local government, education, and community issues. My editors recognized my talent and work ethic, assigning me increasingly challenging stories and complex investigations. For the first time since high school, I felt genuinely excited about my professional future. However, my family's needs had evolved rather than diminished. Jake had graduated college but struggled to find employment that matched his lifestyle expectations. His partial scholarship had been supplemented by student loans that now required monthly payments he couldn't meet on his entry-level sales position. Emma was in her second year of art school, requiring not only tuition assistance but also support for expensive equipment, art supplies, and professional development opportunities. My parents had aged considerably during the years of financial stress. My father's back problems had worsened, limiting his ability to take on physically demanding construction projects. My mother had increased her hours at the dental office but earned barely enough to cover basic household expenses. They looked to me as their financially stable child, the one with a steady job and reliable income who could help bridge the gap between their limited earnings and growing expenses. The request to move back home came during my second year at the newspaper. My parents presented it as a temporary arrangement that would benefit everyone. I could save money on rent while helping with household expenses. They would have helped managing the financial pressures of supporting 2 college students and maintaining their home. The arrangement would allow Emma to focus on her studies without worrying about family financial stress, and give Jake time to establish his career without the burden of immediate loan payments. Moving back into my childhood bedroom at age 24 felt like a step backward, but I rationalized it as a practical decision that served the greater good. My salary could stretch further without rent payments, and I could contribute more substantially to family needs while building my own savings. The arrangement was supposed to last 18 months, just until Emma graduated and Jake's career stabilized. Those 18 months stretched into 3 years as new challenges emerged. Jake married his college girlfriend, Sarah, and they wanted to buy a house, but couldn't qualify for a mortgage without help with the down payment. Emma's art school program extended for an additional year to complete a specialized certification that would enhance her career prospects. My parents discovered that their retirement savings were insufficient and began working with a financial planner who recommended increased monthly contributions to catch up on their goals. Each new demand felt reasonable in isolation. Helping Jake achieve homeownership would provide stability for starting his family. Supporting Emma's extended education would maximize her return on the investment already made in her artistic training. Assisting my parents with retirement planning was simply responsible adult behavior that would benefit everyone in the long run. But the cumulative effect was a life that belonged entirely to other people's needs and priorities. My own dreams of investigative journalism, travel, and career advancement were postponed indefinitely. Dating became nearly impossible when every spare dollar went to family expenses and every weekend was occupied with family obligations. My social connections outside the family withered as I had less time and money for maintaining friendships. The newspaper work remained engaging, and I received several promotions that increased my salary and responsibilities. I covered major local stories, developed expertise in municipal government and education policy, and built a reputation as a thorough, reliable journalist. But opportunities for career advancement increasingly required relocation or significant time investments that conflicted with family obligations. When the Chicago Magazine opportunity first arose, it represented everything I had worked toward professionally. The position would allow me to write long-form investigative pieces about social justice issues, work with experienced journalists who could mentor my career development, and live in a major city with extensive cultural and professional resources. The salary would nearly double my current income, creating the financial independence I had never experienced as an adult. But the family's reaction to my interest in the position revealed the depth of their dependence on my support. My parents had restructured their entire financial planning around my contributions, treating my income as a permanent fixture in their household budget. Emma had built her art school plans assuming I would continue providing both financial support and emotional encouragement through every challenge and setback. Jake had purchased his house based on the knowledge that I would help with emergency expenses and major repairs when needed. The weight of their dependence felt overwhelming. These were people I loved deeply, people who had sacrificed for me when I was younger and needed support. My mother had worked extra hours to help pay for my college application fees. My father had driven me to campus countless times when my car broke down. Emma looked up to me as her primary role model and source of encouragement. Jake genuinely appreciated my help and often expressed gratitude for my contributions to his success. How could I abandon them for personal ambition? How could I prioritize my career dreams over their real, immediate needs? The guilt was consuming, fed by a lifetime of messages that family loyalty required personal sacrifice, that individual success meant nothing if it came at the expense of family relationships. I turned down the Chicago position, telling myself that better opportunities would arise later when the family situation was more stable. The magazine editor was understanding but disappointed, mentioning that positions like this were rare in journalism and might not become available again soon. I assured her I understood the significance of what I was declining, though privately I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of obligations I had never consciously chosen. The family's relief and gratitude were immediate and overwhelming. Emma planned a celebration dinner to thank me for my loyalty and commitment. Jake expressed pride in having a sister who valued family relationships over personal advancement. My parents spoke eloquently about the importance of sticking together through difficult times and how proud they were to have raised such a devoted daughter. But something fundamental had shifted inside me during the decision-making process. For the first time, I had clearly seen the scope of my family's dependence and the extent to which my own dreams had been sacrificed to maintain their comfort and security. I had recognized that my contributions were not temporary assistance during a crisis, but permanent support that enabled their lifestyle choices and financial planning assumptions. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. If I could see the pattern clearly, I could potentially change it. But changing long-established family dynamics would require courage I wasn't sure I possessed and might damage relationships that had defined my entire adult life. The easier path was to continue as before, accepting that some people were meant for adventure and independence, while others were meant for service and sacrifice. Work became my refuge during this period of internal struggle. I threw myself into increasingly challenging assignments, developing expertise in investigative techniques and complex story development. My editors recognized my dedication and talent, assigning me high-profile stories that required extensive research and sophisticated analysis. The work provided intellectual stimulation and professional satisfaction that helped compensate for my personal frustrations. I also began paying closer attention to family dynamics during this time, observing patterns I had previously accepted without question. I noticed how quickly everyone turned to me for solutions instead of attempting to solve problems independently. I saw how my parents had never developed strong financial planning skills because they knew I would help with emergencies. I observed how Emma relied on my emotional support and practical advice for decisions she could easily handle herself. The birthday incident that ultimately changed everything happened during this period of heightened awareness. Emma's crisis call about her illustration deadline came at a moment when I was already questioning the sustainability of our family arrangements. When she asked me to cancel my birthday celebration to help with her project, something inside me rebelled against the automatic assumption that my time and plans were less important than her professional needs. Saying no felt revolutionary and terrifying. I had never refused a direct family request, especially one that seemed urgent and important. Emma's distress was genuine, and her illustration contract was significant for her career development. But I also recognized that she had several weeks to prepare for the deadline and could seek help from other sources if she managed her time more effectively. The family's reaction to my refusal was swift and coordinated, revealing the extent to which they had internalized their expectation of my constant availability. Emma accused me of selfishness and lack of family loyalty. My parents expressed concern about my changing attitude and its potential impact on family relationships. Jake attempted to mediate but clearly expected me to apologize and return to my usual accommodating behavior. The guilt was intense and persistent. I had been conditioned for over a decade to prioritize family needs above my own comfort and preferences. Every family gathering, every financial crisis, every emotional emergency had reinforced the message that my individual needs were less important than collective family welfare. Breaking that pattern, even temporarily, felt like a betrayal of everything I had been taught about love, loyalty, and family responsibility. But I also experienced an unexpected sense of liberation. For 2 hours at my birthday dinner, I had existed as an individual rather than a family support system. My friends had treated me as a person with her own interests, opinions, and experiences worth celebrating. The conversation had ranged over topics that interested me personally rather than family problems that required my intervention and solution. Most importantly, I discovered that the family managed perfectly well without my immediate intervention. Emma figured out her illustration project without my help, producing excellent work that met her deadline requirements. My parents handled their weekly financial decisions without my input. Jake found alternative childcare arrangements when he needed them. The world did not end when I prioritized my own needs, even temporarily. This realization prompted a fundamental shift in my understanding of family relationships and personal responsibility. If my family could function effectively without my constant support, what did that say about the necessity of my sacrifices? Had I been enabling their dependence rather than providing essential assistance? Was my willingness to solve their problems actually preventing them from developing their own capabilities and independence? I began experimenting with small boundary-setting behaviors over the following months. When Emma called with routine business questions she could easily research herself, I suggested resources and encouraged her to develop her own expertise. When my parents asked for help with financial decisions, I recommended they consult with professionals rather than relying on my amateur advice. When Jake needed emergency assistance, I sometimes said I wasn't available and suggested he explore other options. Each boundary I established was met with resistance, confusion, and emotional manipulation designed to make me feel guilty for prioritizing my own needs. Family members expressed hurt feelings, questioned my love and loyalty, and reminded me repeatedly of all the ways they had supported me over the years. The pressure to return to my previous role was constant and psychologically exhausting. But I persisted in my boundary-setting experiments, and gradually they began to feel normal rather than rebellious. I used my extra time and energy to pursue interests I had neglected for years, taking a photography class, joining a book club, and beginning work on a novel I had always wanted to write. I rediscovered aspects of my personality that had been buried under family obligations and began to remember what it felt like to have dreams and pursue them actively. The real crisis came when the Chicago magazine called again 6 months later. They had been following my work at the regional newspaper and were impressed with a series I had written about municipal government corruption. A similar position had opened up with even better compensation and professional development opportunities. Was I interested in reconsidering their offer? This time, I didn't immediately dismiss the possibility. I scheduled a formal interview and flew to Chicago to meet the team in person, using vacation time and personal funds rather than asking family permission or support. The magazine office exceeded my expectations, bustling with the kind of creative energy and professional purpose I had always imagined in my ideal work environment. The position they offered represented everything I had dreamed of during those years when career advancement felt impossible. I would write investigative pieces about social justice issues that genuinely mattered to me, work with experienced journalists who could mentor my professional development, and live in a major city with extensive cultural and intellectual resources. The compensation package would provide the financial independence I had never experienced as an adult. When I returned home and called a family meeting to discuss the opportunity, the reaction was immediate and intense. Emma accused me of planning to abandon her just as her art career was reaching a crucial development phase. Jake questioned how I could leave my nephew when he was old enough to form real memories and relationships with his aunt. My parents painted a detailed picture of their financial vulnerability and declining health, wondering how I could be so heartless as to move away when they needed me most. But this time, I had spent months learning to recognize emotional manipulation for what it was. I had seen concrete evidence that my family could manage their problems effectively when I wasn't immediately available to provide solutions. I had remembered what it felt like to have professional ambitions and pursue them systematically rather than just wishfully. The conversation that followed was the most difficult of my adult life. I listened to each family member's concerns and acknowledged their feelings without automatically accepting responsibility for solving their problems. I explained that my decision to pursue the Chicago opportunity wasn't a rejection of family relationships, but rather an attempt to build the kind of independent, successful life that would ultimately benefit everyone. Emma's response was the most emotionally challenging. She had always looked up to me as her primary source of support and encouragement, and my potential departure felt like abandonment during the most vulnerable period of her professional development. She had just received her largest illustration contract and was terrified of managing the business aspects without my guidance and assistance. I recognized that Emma's dependence on me had prevented her from developing confidence in her own business skills and decision-making abilities. By constantly providing advice and support, I had inadvertently communicated that she was incapable of handling professional challenges independently. My departure would force her to develop capabilities she already possessed but had never been required to use. Jake's concerns centered on family unity and his children's relationship with their extended family. He had built his life around the assumption that I would always be available for family gatherings, emergency childcare, and emotional support during difficult periods. My move to Chicago would disrupt these arrangements and force him to develop alternative support systems. But I also recognized that Jake had never learned to plan for emergencies or manage family crises independently because he knew I would always be available to help. My constant availability had enabled him to make decisions without considering their full consequences, knowing that family support would be available if problems arose. My parents' reaction was the most complex because it involved both genuine emotion and calculated manipulation. They had structured their entire retirement planning around my financial contributions, treating my income as a permanent fixture in their household budget. My departure would require them to dramatically adjust their lifestyle expectations and financial plans. They also genuinely loved me and worried about my happiness and safety in a new city far from family support. Their concerns about my welfare were real and touching, even as they were intertwined with self-interested anxiety about losing my practical and financial assistance. During the week following our family meeting, I received constant calls and visits from family members, each presenting carefully crafted arguments about why I needed to stay in Ohio. Emma showed up with a portfolio of her latest work, explaining how none of it would have been possible without my support and guidance. Jake brought my nephew Mason for special aunt-nephew activities, making sure I saw how much my presence meant to the child. My parents scheduled another family dinner where they presented detailed financial projections showing how much they would struggle without my contributions. They had researched the cost of living in Chicago and calculated that my increased salary wouldn't provide as much financial benefit as it initially appeared. They reminded me of family values, the importance of staying close to people who really mattered, and the sacrifices they had made when I was younger and needed support. The emotional pressure was enormous, designed to make me feel guilty and selfish for prioritizing my own dreams over family stability. But I had spent months learning to differentiate between genuine family needs and manipulative attempts to maintain control over my decisions. Their financial struggles were real, but they were also consequences of planning assumptions that treated my income as their permanent entitlement. I accepted the Chicago position and gave my family 6 weeks' notice of my departure. The announcement triggered the biggest family crisis in years, with accusations of selfishness, betrayal, and lack of family loyalty. Emma stopped speaking to me entirely, communicating only through angry emails about how I was destroying her career and abandoning the people who loved me most. Jake alternated between attempts to guilt me into staying and expressions of anger about my selfishness and lack of consideration for family relationships. My parents cycled through denial, bargaining, and fury, each stage accompanied by increasingly desperate attempts to change my mind or delay my departure. The 6 weeks before my move were emotionally exhausting. Every family interaction was fraught with tension and recrimination. I was painted as the villain who was tearing apart a loving family for personal ambition. Extended family members and longtime friends weighed in with opinions about whether I was making the right choice, some supporting my decision to pursue my career, while others questioned whether professional success was worth damaging family relationships. I doubted myself constantly during this period. Maybe I was being selfish and ungrateful. Maybe family loyalty was more important than personal achievement. Maybe I was making a terrible mistake that I would regret for the rest of my life. The guilt was overwhelming, especially when I saw how genuinely distressed my family members were about my departure. But I also remembered the Chicago magazine office and the sense of purpose and excitement I had felt there. I thought about the investigative stories I could write, the social issues I could explore, the career I could finally build without constant interruption and obligation. I considered the woman I had become over the past months as I learned to set boundaries and prioritize my own needs alongside family concerns. Moving day arrived on a cold February morning. I loaded my belongings into a rental truck while my family watched from the living room window, their expressions ranging from sadness to anger to resignation. Only Jake came outside to say goodbye, giving me an awkward hug and whispering that he hoped I would find happiness in Chicago, even though he didn't understand my decision. Emma stayed in her room, refusing to acknowledge my departure. My parents stood at the window looking devastated, as if I were moving to another continent rather than a 6-hour drive away. The guilt was intense, but so was the sense of liberation as I drove away from the life that had been defined entirely by other people's needs and expectations. The first few months in Chicago were challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated. The job was demanding and competitive, requiring skills I was still developing and confidence I had never been allowed to build. The city was expensive and overwhelming after years of small-town life. I was lonely, having left behind all my social connections and support systems. But there were also moments of pure joy and excitement. Working on my first major investigative piece about housing discrimination in Chicago neighborhoods. Seeing my byline in a publication that actually mattered to readers beyond my local community. Collaborating with experienced journalists who respected my ideas and challenged me to do better work. The family communications during this period were minimal and strained. Emma maintained her silence for months. Jake sent occasional updates about family life, but avoided any mention of my new career or whether I was happy. My parents called weekly with carefully neutral conversations that skirted around the obvious tension in our relationship. I understood their hurt and disappointment, but I also recognized that I was thriving in ways that wouldn't have been possible if I had remained in Ohio. My writing improved dramatically under the guidance of experienced editors who pushed me to develop my skills and pursue challenging stories. I gained confidence in my ability to handle complex assignments and tight deadlines. Most importantly, I began to build friendships with colleagues who shared my passion for meaningful journalism and who treated me as an individual rather than a family support system. We shared meals, explored the city together, and gradually formed connections that had nothing to do with obligation or shared history. When my father's heart attack occurred 8 months after my move, I immediately took emergency leave and drove home to help manage the crisis. The family's relief at seeing me was palpable, and for a moment it felt like nothing had changed. They needed me, just as they always had, and I was there to provide practical and emotional support during a terrifying time. But something fundamental was different. Instead of automatically taking over and solving everyone's problems, I found myself asking questions about what they had already done to address the situation. Had they contacted the insurance company? Had they spoken with financial counselors about payment options? Had they researched the medical team and treatment protocols? The answers revealed that they had reverted to their old pattern of emotional reaction followed by expectation that I would handle practical details. But I was no longer the same person who had left 8 months earlier. I had learned to think strategically, ask difficult questions, and expect people to take responsibility for their own problems before seeking help from others. I stayed for 2 weeks, helping my father through his recovery and assisting with immediate crisis management. But I also insisted that the family develop long-term plans that didn't depend on my physical presence or constant availability. I helped them research local resources for financial planning, medical advocacy, and emotional support that could provide ongoing assistance. When it was time to return to Chicago, the departure felt different than it had 8 months earlier. My father, weakened but recovering, thanked me for coming home and told me he was proud of the career I was building. My mother, still hurt by my move, acknowledged that I had handled the crisis well and that perhaps I had learned valuable skills in Chicago. Emma had begun following my work online and admitted that my recent article about healthcare access had been powerful and important. Jake asked thoughtful questions about my life in Chicago and expressed genuine curiosity about my work and experiences. The relationships were still strained, but there was a foundation of respect that hadn't existed before. Back in Chicago, I threw myself into work with renewed energy and focus. The time away had given me perspective on how much I had grown both professionally and personally during my first months in the city. I pitched an investigative series about family financial literacy that drew directly from my own experiences watching my parents struggle with money management throughout my childhood. The series was well received by readers and editors, leading to speaking opportunities and recognition within the journalism community. More importantly, it represented the kind of meaningful work I had always dreamed of doing, using my writing skills to explore social issues that affected real people's lives. A year after moving to Chicago, I received a call from Emma. She was getting married to another illustrator she had met through professional networking, and she wanted me to be in her wedding party. The invitation felt different from the old demands for assistance, more like a genuine request for participation in an important life event. I flew home for the wedding weekend, prepared for awkward family dynamics, but hoping for the best. Instead, I found a family that had learned to function more independently during my absence. My parents had worked with a financial planner to develop a realistic budget and emergency fund. Emma had built a successful illustration business with proper client management systems and professional boundaries. Jake had matured into a capable father and husband who no longer expected family members to solve his problems or provide constant emotional support. The wedding celebration was beautiful, and my role in it felt meaningful rather than obligatory. Emma thanked me in her speech for teaching her about independence and self-reliance, even when the lessons had been painful to learn. That weekend, I realized that my departure had forced everyone to grow in ways that ultimately benefited the entire family. My absence had required family members to develop skills and independence they had never needed while I was available to solve their problems. The relationships that emerged were based on mutual respect rather than one-sided dependence. 2 years into my Chicago career, I was promoted to senior writer and began leading my own investigative team. The work was challenging and fulfilling in ways I had never imagined possible during my years in Ohio. I was making a real difference through journalism, exposing corruption and advocating for social justice through carefully researched, well-written stories. I also developed a social life that wasn't centered around family obligations or crisis management. I dated seriously for the first time in years, eventually entering a relationship with another journalist who understood the demands of the career and supported my professional ambitions. We traveled together, explored the city's cultural offerings, and built a partnership based on mutual respect and shared interests. The guilt that had plagued me during the early months in Chicago gradually faded, replaced by confidence in my choices and pride in my achievements. I learned to recognize the difference between healthy family loyalty and destructive self-sacrifice. I understood that enabling other people's dependence wasn't actually helping them, even when it felt like love and support. My family relationships stabilized into a new normal that worked better for everyone involved. I visited home regularly, but maintained clear boundaries about how long I would stay and what kinds of assistance I would provide. Family members learned to solve their own problems first and ask for help only when genuinely necessary. The emergency calls and guilt trips stopped, replaced by genuine communication about our lives, interests, and experiences. Emma's illustration career flourished as she developed confidence in her own business skills and decision-making abilities. She eventually married her fellow artist and moved to Portland, where they started a successful creative design company. Jake matured into a thoughtful father and husband who took full responsibility for his family's financial planning and emotional well-being. He developed his own career in sales management and created a stable, independent household that didn't require family assistance for routine expenses or emergency situations. My parents learned to manage their finances with professional guidance and developed social connections that didn't revolve around their children's availability and support. They aged more gracefully than they might have if they had continued depending on me for practical and emotional assistance, taking pride in their increasing independence and self-sufficiency. 5 years after moving to Chicago, I won a National Journalism Award for my series on family economic stability and financial literacy. The recognition was professionally satisfying, but the personal significance was even greater. The work had grown directly from my own experience of breaking free from financial and emotional dependence patterns that had held my entire family back from reaching their full potential. Standing at the awards ceremony, I thought about the woman who had turned down her first Chicago opportunity out of guilt and fear. She had genuinely believed that family loyalty meant sacrificing her own dreams for other people's comfort and security. She had confused enabling with love, dependence with closeness, and self-sacrifice with virtue. The woman I had become understood that real love sometimes requires difficult boundaries and temporary disappointment. True family support means encouraging independence rather than fostering dependence. Genuine loyalty includes the courage to disappoint people when necessary to help them grow and develop their own capabilities. The award also brought new career opportunities, including offers to write a book based on my family financial literacy series and to join the staff of a national magazine as a contributing editor. The success felt surreal after so many years of believing that my dreams were selfish luxuries that had to be sacrificed for family stability and security. When I called my family from the awards ceremony to share the news, each conversation was warm and celebratory, filled with genuine pride and excitement about my achievement. Emma promised to frame the newspaper article about the award and display it prominently in her Portland studio. Jake said he was telling everyone at work about his sister, the famous journalist, who was changing the world through her writing. My parents expressed deep pride in my accomplishments and mentioned they had always known I would achieve great things, conveniently forgetting their years of resistance to my career ambitions and attempts to keep me tied to family obligations. But their revisionist history didn't bother me anymore. I understood that people need to construct narratives that allow them to feel good about themselves and their relationships. What mattered was that we had all learned to function as independent, capable adults who chose to maintain family connections out of love rather than obligation or guilt. The relationships that emerged from this transformation were stronger and more authentic than what we had before, based on mutual respect rather than emotional manipulation or financial dependence. My story illustrates the possibility of change even in long-established family patterns that seem permanent and unchangeable. Breaking free from unhealthy dynamics requires courage, persistence, and the willingness to disappoint people in the short term for everyone's long-term growth and well-being. It means risking relationships that are based on dependence rather than genuine love and respect. But the rewards are significant. Authentic relationships, personal fulfillment, professional achievement, and the satisfaction of knowing that you're living your own life rather than someone else's expectations. Family can mean forever, but only when it's based on mutual respect and individual wholeness rather than sacrifice and dependence. As I continue building my career and personal life in Chicago, I'm grateful for the painful lessons that taught me the difference between love and enablement, between family loyalty and self-sacrifice. The journey from reliable daughter to independent professional wasn't easy, but it was necessary for everyone involved. Today, when young people ask me about balancing family obligations with personal ambitions, I tell them that real love sometimes requires disappointing the people you care about. True family support means encouraging independence rather than fostering dependence. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to solve other people's problems so they can learn to solve them themselves. The banner in my family's story would have read, "Family means growth," rather than "Family means forever." Because the strongest families are made up of independent, capable individuals who choose to love and support each other from a place of wholeness rather than need.